Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Hi, and welcome to Common Ground. I'm your host, Ashley Hall. On this week's episode of Common Ground, Jon Romer performs and shares his knowledge of the Native Flute. Carolyn Abbott of Brainerd shows us the many facets of fiber art. And finally, we head to Park Rapids to visit the Hubbard County Fair.
What I'm going to show you today is how to do a paper lamination, which this is an example of paper lamination where I have a sheer polyester fabric and I have fastened newspaper to one side of it. It's not the whole newspaper, it's just a very thin layer of the surface. I like layering the pieces so that you can see through them and get a little bit more depth. I've also worked with laminations that end up being a complete lamination, which I can then cut up and adhere to some other fabric that I've hand dyed or done other processes on. I start doing the lamination by taking 1/8 from the newspaper. And I'm going to iron these. It seems kind of funny to be ironing newspaper, but I want to get these creases out. Now I've taken a paintbrush, a cheap paintbrush, and I mangle it by giving it a really bad haircut. Now I have taken some regular acrylic paint and I've mixed it with a little bit of matte medium and some water to thin it out a bit. I'm going to do some dry brushing onto my newspaper. I want to get the extra paint off so it's not going to be a big blob. But I'm just making these black marks on my paper. And these are representing the black marks that you see on the bark of a birch tree. I then take a sheer fabric. This is a very sheer polyester organza. And I'm going to lay that on top and start pinning it in place. Now I have all of my pins in place and I'm ready for the next step. So now I have this large piece that I can use as a stencil, and I'm going to pin that in place. I don't need to pin it quite as much as I pinned when I was pinning the fabric down. This stencil is going to act as my silk screen. So what I'm going to do is pour matte medium along the bottom here. If I were using a wooden silk screen, I would have a little area down at the bottom where I could put the matte medium, but here I'm just going to spread it. I have an area that doesn't have any design in it. And then I'm going to start scraping the medium up toward the other end of the fabric. Okay, this has the matte medium in it. I don't want it to dry in there. So I'm going to put it in some water right away. Another pin. Now I'm going to unpin this. But what I need to do now is heat set this. So I'm going to take some kitchen parchment and I need to iron this piece. I would say probably 15 minutes to make sure that it's heat set. The next step is to get the paper off. To get the paper off, I'm going to wad it up and put it in a bucket of water. And that will need to soak for about 10 minutes. Now this has been soaking and the paper is starting to loosen. So I'm going to lay this down on top of the plastic and start removing the paper. I will continue scrubbing and rinsing until I've gotten all of that first layer of paper off, and I just have the part that was right next to the share that's actually kind of glued on to my share fabric. My final step in the nice months is to take this out to my clothesline and spray it with a hose to get all of these little pieces of paper removed from it. But you can see how you're starting to see the birch trees. Lamination has dried. I want to put some grass idea down at the bottom. So I'm going to lay this out. I'm going to lay this out and put some grass color down at the bottom. For my grass color, I went out and took pictures of grass and then had color copies made of this on inexpensive paper. I'm going to tear off the white edges. I put it face down so that my edges don't end up having the white on them like this piece does. And I find having a straight edge to pull against, as long as I'm not going for an irregular edge, works very well. So this is a photograph of some grasses that I took, and then I worked on it in Photoshop to isolate areas and end up making a black and white, and then I took it down and had a copy made of it with the toner. And then I ran it through the machine, and this is now a stencil, which is called a thermofax stencil. So I'm going to put this down on top and then use this tool and spread that across. Okay, here's the piece after the grass paper has been scrubbed away. So you have a hint of green down at the bottom that gives you the idea that that's the ground. Next, I want to add some fine twigs to it. Now this looks very dark right now because you're not only seeing what's on the sheer fabric, you're seeing what's underneath. Now this area I want to be a little bit thinner, so I'm just going to do it delicately that way to get finer branches down here. So this has created my twigs for the upper branches of my birch trees. After this black dries, I'm going to add some more color to the top. I'm going for summer, so I'm going to be using some brighter greens. This is kind of my medium green, which is going to be the base color. And I'll use this regular screen, silk screen squeegee. So this is starting to give the hint of the leaves in the tree. Next, I'm going to take a sponge, a sea sponge, because it'll give me nice texture. I'm going to use the same color and just start bouncing it around. Now you start to see more individual leaves with this texture. But I'm still using my base green. Now there are going to be areas where the sunlight is hitting the leaves, so I'm going to go to a lighter green and another sponge. Got to find an area of the sponge that doesn't have great big blobs on it. And I'm going to be adding a little bit of the lighter green for where the sunlight is starting to hit the leaves. I can let this dry now. I would probably iron it again to keep it all nice and flat. Then I would use my soldering iron and a straight edge. I have a piece of glass that I lay on my table, an old storm window. I lay my piece on top of it, use a metal straight edge, and heat up my soldering iron and cut off the edges and trim it up the right size. Okay, so this is how I make my birch trees. I think the most difficult part of this process that I've had to learn is patience. Things take time. You need to let things dry. Sometimes that's hard to do. You want to get back to it right away, and then you end up smearing pieces.
I'm Sue Pierce. I'm the leader of the LaPorte Comets 4-H Club. I've been leading for 15 years up there. 4-H teaches responsibility, citizenship, to work with others, not be afraid to ask for help. Youth leadership would be another one that the older ones can do. Just, a sense of value, family togetherness. Family togetherness time is basically, for the fair.
Hi, I'm Christine Pierce, and I'm doing crocheting, doing sheep, and I'm doing sewing. Today I'm going to show you my animal, and that would be a sheep. This is my sheep.
What's her name?
That one is Taylor, and that one is Tyler. To get these sheep ready for the fair, you just gotta basically lead them around and just kind of make them trust you, know that they're not gonna get hurt at all, and that they're just gonna be okay. To raise a sheep, you have to be patient with them. You gotta give them a lot of time.
Herdsmanship is the child or 4-H'er's ability to keep their pen clean, their animal clean, the walkway clean, food and water in there when it's appropriated. It's their cleanliness of 4-H and how they care for their animals.
What 4-H group are you with?
4-H riders, Hubbard County 4-H riders. There.
Ah. What do you make out of the milk?
Well, sometimes you drink the milk, give a little bit to the cats.
Do you make cheese or anything?
We did once. It turned out pretty good.
My name is Jon Romer. My wife Sandy and I have lived here on Lake Kitchie for some 21 years. I'd like to play a beautiful Ojibwe love song that's especially appropriate to this time of the year. I'm happy to share the things that have been shared with me by elders, knowledgeable Native American flute players, and others about the flute. So I'm sharing information that's been shared with me. The flutes that you see are they're really wonderful flutes. The Ojibwe flutes are 6-hole flutes. Lakota flutes are 5-hole. The flutes that I have, of course, are Ojibwe flutes, and my teacher, Wendy Downwind from Red Lake, is the person who I worked with at Buganagijic School, and he put me on the path of learning to play the flutes. The unique thing about these flutes, I think, visually first, is how that the flute maker, the artist, has captured the pattern of the light and dark grain in the cedar that has become part of the structure, part of the visual beauty, the aesthetic beauty of the flutes. The largest flute in the center is a low C, so that plays the middle C on the piano. The one adjacent to it is a D flute, and the next one over is an E, and so on. And the pitch or the key of the flute is determined by the volume of the vibrating column of air within the tube. The essential parts of the flute is an air chamber in here, so as one blows the air into this end, there's a hole under this block, or the bird as it's called sometimes, and the air comes up this hole, shoots across a space under the block, and splits on a wedge in front of the block. Some of the air goes up in a way, and the rest of the air goes down into the length of the flute proper, and then by shortening and lengthening the column of vibrating air, one creates the different pitches. It's really like a pipe on a pipe organ, and in fact Carlos Nakai talks about on page 3 of his book, The Art of the Native American Flute, that the pipe organ is really a collection of Native American flutes. And in the course of the pipe organ, of course, there are no holes in the pipe, so each pipe can produce one pitch. This produces many. Another very interesting aspect to the block, or the bird, is that when the flute is used as a chording instrument, the flute maker, the young man who makes the flute, may carve his clan symbol there. And then, just as in broad American modern society, as I've been told, people are not supposed to marry their cousins. The tradition in Native American culture is that one married or marries someone in another clan, in which case the other clan symbol could be burned in or carved on another part of the flute. And I think that's really precious because it celebrates both of those ancestral lines. So the clan symbol is important in the culture, and it's absolutely necessary for the flute to sound. This is hand carved by Odell Borg, who is a fine flute maker. I have flutes from 3 or 4 other flute makers on the table here. The other unique thing about the symbolism on the flute with regard to the holes, my teacher told me whenever I'm talking about the flutes to make sure that I mention that the top hole represents the Creator, the second hole represents the Earth Mother, and the bottom 4 holes represent the 4 directions. The flute's voice is unique. Flute makers traditionally keep the sound of the wind as it blew through the pine forest across the branch before it became a flute. And so when one plays the flute, you also hear nature's breath, nature's sound as a part of the tone quality. It's so good to be able to play out here today. The flute makes a beautiful, beautiful sound. I'd like to play an Ojibwe farewell song. And this song was a song that would have been sung by Ojibwe women as the men would leave the village to go hunting. The expectation would be that they would be successful and bring home game. Everyone would sit down to a wonderful feast together. And in Ojibwe, I've been told, there's no word for a final goodbye. The phrase is translated to be, I will see you again another day. So this is a happy goodbye song, just a temporary goodbye. And here's that song.
you so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you next week right here on Common Ground. If you have a segment idea for Common Ground pertaining to North Central Minnesota, contact us at legacy@lptv.org or call us at 218-333-3022. To view this episode or any Common Ground segment, visit us at lptv.org/Common Ground. Individual segments or copies of Common Ground, please call 218-333-3020. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. If you enjoyed this segment of Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground, consider making a contribution at lptv.org.